Hey, how's it going? My name's Jonathan Clark. Welcome to video number 2 of 4 in my series of tutorials about Jamstix, drum track production software. Actually, there's probably more than 4 videos in the series because I also have an installation video that's separate, and at the end of these videos I'm also going to produce a song, like right from start to finish, to give you a little bit more of an idea of how I work, my own workflow. It's like you're watching over my shoulder as I build a track. So we'll put a drum track in a song there, probably just a conventional track, not a dance music track. So that video will also be online. Now, in this particular video, I'm going to cover the song builder, which includes a talk of the different drumming styles and the different drummer models that are available. And I'll touch on Jamcushion if you happen to also have that as part of your Jamstix package. And I'm also going to talk about the drum kits in this video. Now, if you missed the first video in the series, you want to watch it, I'll put the link here on the screen right now. If you don't see a link right now, it's probably because you're on a mobile device. As of the time I'm filming right now, YouTube does not publish annotations to most mobile devices. It's unfortunate. But anytime I say there's a link on the screen or whatever, if you can't see it, look in the text description of the video on YouTube, and because I'll put all the links in that text description too, so you can find them there. Now, as far as YouTube goes, I will try to answer any questions if possible. I do that with all my videos. However, for this series in particular, I would recommend you check out the support forums at the Rayzune website. I'll put a link up. Simply because they actually answer all their questions on the support forums. It's a good source of a lot of information. And also remember that I spend 9 months of the year working in a remote bush camp doing forestry work out in remote areas of Canada. So for a lot of time during the year I don't have internet access, and so I'm pretty slow at answering questions sometimes. I will try to answer them eventually if you post them, but it could be quite a while. So the Rayzune forums are the smartest way to get a fast, good answer. If you're looking for the other videos in this series or any of my other videos, djbolivia.ca/videos. Okay, and in this particular video, I'm going to use Cubase as a host software system. Used Pro Tools last time, Cubase this time. Okay, let's get to work. Okay, so before we get into examining the song builder in more detail, let's get Cubase up and running, and I'll show you what I had to do to make Jamstix work. Okay, now I am using Cubase 6, obviously an older version. As of last month, Cubase 8 came out, but it's what I've got right now. So when Cubase boots up, no matter what version you've got, what I'm going to do, project folder here, I'm just going to rename that and call it Jamstix. And I'm just going to create, we'll just leave it on acoustic guitar and vocal. Doesn't matter what session you set up, okay? So as far as actually getting Jamstix up and running, when I first loaded Cubase, Jamstix wasn't visible. So what you have to do, you have to go to Devices, and then you have to go to Plugin Information. And when I scroll down through here, you can see Jamstix is right there. However, it was not there when I first loaded Cubase, even though Jamstix was installed. So what I had to do was I had to go to VST 2.x plugin paths, and right here you can see that plugin 64 is in the directory. That wasn't there at the time. So what I had to do was I had to click Add. I had to go to my plugins folder, 64. I had to click on it, click OK, and then that loaded it into here. And then once I did that, I clicked OK. And then you might want to click update plugin information just to make sure it loads. Now, even after you do that, it may still not be visible down here. And it might be because it's at the bottom of the list. Or, quite often, when you first load a plugin into a DAW, if it wasn't there when the DAW initialized, the plugin doesn't initialize. So you might, at this point, have to close Cubase down, it closes, and then you just simply open it back up, and when it reopens, it will re-examine the plugin folders, and at that point it'll load Jamstix properly. This is only the very first time that you use it. After that, not a problem. Okay, so I guess we're not allowed to use that folder again. Doesn't matter. Create. Okay, so we've got a session created, and we're going to maximize that window. So in my session, I'm going to go to Project. I'm going to go to Add Track. I'm going to go to Instrument, because Jamstix will be an instrument. How many do I want? I just need one copy of the drum track. Instrument, no VSTI. So I'll click the drop down, and there, now I can see Jamstix 3. That's good. So I'll click on that. I'll go Add Track. Okay, and so now we have this track. If I want to change the name, I can change the name. Okay, and if you look over here, you can see the plugin, the instrument. So if I click on that and then go down to Jamstix 3, it brings it up. Okay, so now Jamstix is going to be playing on this drums track. Okay, so we'll rearrange this stuff so it's all easy to look at. And I should point out too, be careful which plugin you're loading. When I first did this, I forgot that Cubase 6, I just looked at the date, because Cubase 6 came out in like 2010, I think, or certainly quite a while ago. And I thought it was only a 32-bit system. It's a 64. But when I loaded it the first time, I loaded the plugin as a 32-bit plugin. And of course, when I tried to open Jamstix, it crashed. I had no idea why. I was getting a little bit frustrated because I thought it wasn't working properly with Cubase. And then I thought about it and then realized, oh wait, maybe Cubase is 64-bit, and it is. So I had to go back into the devices, into the plugin information, into my browser. I had to remove the System32, the drivers 32 folder, and then reinstall it as a 64-bit, and it worked perfectly from that point. Okay, so at this point, let's go to the song builder. Okay, so when you first open Jamstix, up on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see two things. You're going to see the Quick Start list, and you're going to see the song builder. Okay, so let's look at the Quick Start list first. So basically, all of these songs are songs that you could pick to get going very quickly. Over here is the song that I'm working on, and right now it's kind of just a default, almost empty. It just says verse. And if I were to double click on one of these songs, it's going to build a song for me very quickly. Okay, so we have a lot of choices here. We have, for example, a disco format with Jamstix, the default drummer. We have some different jam sessions. We have this funky song using Chad, so that probably emulates Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers. We have some jam cushion defaults. We have a Motown sound. And remember that when you've got a song, you've basically got four elements to it. You have the layout of the song, you have the style, the drum style of the song, you have the drummer's personality, drummer style, and you have the exact kit. And all four of those things can be changed, but within this Quick Start menu, it always builds a song quickly for you, picking all of those four based on some defaults. Okay, so the Motown sound would be the Motown style with Phil Collins as a drummer. We have reggae, so that's with probably based on Stuart Copeland of The Police, because they had a lot of reggae influences in their music. We have the standard song. We have all kinds of things, okay? So, yeah, if I were to double click on one of these, let's do that. Let's go back down to, say, Phil, Motown Phil. Double click, and look, see, it's built a song for me very quickly. And you can see the drummer here is Phil, the kit, R&B, classic, roomy. It's picked all of these things automatically for me based on presets. Now I'm going to do a Control-Z, which will probably erase the track. Yeah. Okay, so redo, add track. Look at Jamstix again. So this is once again what it looks like when you first open Jamstix. Now let's look at building a song by doing it with a little bit more of our own choice instead of using the Quick Start. And I think maybe this is a good time to interrupt and talk about Jamcussion. Now, Jamcussion is kind of a parallel system to the normal Jamstix drum kit and everything else. But with Jamcussion, it's not in all versions. It's not in the intro version of Jamstix. There's 5 different levels of Jamstix right now, and 3 of those 5 options, like the Jamstix P, I think it's called, Jamstix Studio, and maybe Jamstix XL. I think those, I don't know. Anyway, there's 3 of them, two or three of them have Jamcussion as part of the package. I have Jamcussion. You may not. It probably doesn't matter. Okay, you can still build stuff without Jamcussion. So what's the difference? The basic Jamstix has the main parts of the kit, like a standard drum kit, kick drum, snare, hi-hats, cymbals. Okay, Jamcussion, it's the same concept, but it's with all the other percussion hand instruments. Okay, so you're going to see hand drums, you're going to see jam blocks, you're going to see shakers, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so if you don't have Jamcussion, don't worry. Anyway, going back to the layout, now with the quick start, it will pick a layout in terms of verses, choruses, and stuff like that. That's already defined. But let's say that I want to create my own, and my own layout, and I already talked about 8 different types of part. So there's I stands for intro, there's V for verse, there's choruses, C, there's bridges, B, pre-chorus, P, drum solo, D, solo, S, ending, E. Okay, so if I want to build a song, I can click this little thing and I can choose one of these layouts if I want, but let's say I don't want to do that. I'm building something totally from scratch. So I'm going to delete, and as I'm thinking my song through, I'm going to say I'm going to have an intro. Let's put 2 verses at the start, and then a pre-chorus, then a chorus, and then we'll have another verse, and then we'll have a pre-chorus and a chorus, and then we'll have a bridge, another pre-chorus and a chorus, we'll repeat the chorus, and we'll have an ending. Okay, so I've set up exactly the format that I want it to look like when it comes over here. And I just hit OK. Now, it hasn't built it yet. We're still picking stuff. Okay, so there you can see my structure as it's going to appear. Now, next, we're going to... Oh, and I should say too, right now, Jamstix doesn't include a couple of other types of choices for parts that I would maybe... it'd be cool to see. Like, it'd be nice to have a silent section. It would be nice to have a refrain section, maybe a breakdown section. Maybe those will come in future versions, but it doesn't matter because any of those things you can do by being creative the way you lay things out. Like, for example, if my song is, say I've written a song that's just verse, refrain, verse, refrain, verse, refrain the whole way through. What's an example of that? Bob Dylan, Tangled Up in Blue. Since they don't have refrain as part of a structure right now, what I could just do is call the refrains a chorus. So it'd be verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus as I build it. Basically, you can be creative. What's in a name? It doesn't really matter. Okay? Shakespeare. What's in a name? So, moving on, let's look at the styles next. So if you double click or single click on the style, you'll have a list over here. Now, right now, if I cancel, I have 8th Rock as a default. You may also. Now, I have this full studio version of Jamstix. So if you look up here, I have 510 different styles. That's an incredible number of styles to work with. 510 different styles. And within Jamstix, these are categorized into groups. Okay, so I have a total of 28 groups in my version, the studio version. Within those 28 groups, there's a total of 510 styles. Okay, so let's look at a couple. If you click on a drop-down black triangle, within the Afro-Cuban, I've got Cha-Cha-Cha, Custom Latin, Mambo, Mozambique, Rumba, Salsa, Songo. Within blues, I have 6/8, Bo Diddley, all kinds. So most of these categories have at least 4 to 8 different styles, but if you look at Jamstix 1, this folder includes all of the legacy styles from the first implementation of Jamstix. So that folder is pretty fat. A lot of different choices there. Anyway, once I've come up, looked through all these different styles, and I've decided what style my song is going to be, I will load it. So let's come up with a choice. Let's go with a rock style, and let's go with a heavy snares. Now you can see if you click on one of these, the style description tells you what's going on. This style ditches the standard rock snare backbeat for a steady quarter note snare beating. This is a very common approach in the 60s, often associated with Motown. Nevertheless, it can also be found in modern productions ranging from rock to punk and metal. So every different style, or most styles, have a bit of a description so you understand what it's all about. Okay, if I wanted to, if the song was playing in my host, I could preview it and listen to see what it sounds like, but I'm not going to do that. Let's load the style. You have to do that. And now you can see heavy snares. My style has been picked. And I can go back and change that if I want. Okay, moving on next, let's go to the drummer. Same thing, click on that. And once again, we have a list of available drummers. Even if you have the basic version, you're going to have several choices. But since I have the full studio version, I have 31 different drummers. So some of these drummers, you know, Chad, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Charlie's probably Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones, Keith Moon from The Who, Lars from Metallica, Neil Peart from Rush, Phil Collins, all kinds of choices, okay? So most of these, we'll go with Phil. This drummer uses very recognizable fill patterns and techniques while otherwise staying true to whatever the underlying style is. A unique accent habit of this model is the placement of single, low-volume snare bounces in front of kick notes. Okay, that's a Phil Collins type of style. So if I decide I like Phil as a drummer, I just go load player, and Phil has been loaded. Now, I'm just going to go back in. You can change it if you want. Within the drummers, there's a couple unique things. There's machine. This model is used for electronic styles where a more drum machine-like behavior is desired. It disables the limb transition logic and has no timing or power variations. Okay, so that's a unique one. That's not based on a real drummer. There's the silent drummer. Maybe that would be useful for you. There's Latino. This drummer can add Latin flavor to any style. And the Latino one obviously may be a good one if you're using jam cushion also at the same time, is to have a Latino drummer style. Okay, but like I said, let's go with Phil, load player. Okay, next thing that we're going to pick, 4 things that we have to pick: style, drummer, kit, and the layout of the song. So next thing we're going to pick is the kit. And when I did the demo version of the song that I put in that I played in the first video, put in my first blog post, I just went with the standard kit. But as you can see, there's all kinds of kits. There's all these different categories, and same thing within each category. If you click on the triangle, it opens up and you've got a bunch of different choices. And so I have, in my studio version of Jamstix, I have 146 different kits. Now, some of these will not be in your version if you have a basic one. Example, Latin category. The Boomy, E-Latin, and Latin kit, they all have XL in brackets after them. That's because they're part of the XL expansion pack. If you don't have the XL expansion pack, you're not going to get those. Okay. So what are we going to use? We've got Phil Collins playing, or Phil, I should say, playing a Motown sound. So what kind of kit are we going to use? Will we use an R&B kit? Yeah, we could. R&B classic roomy? Sure. Okay, so looking at the kit, the right side, always a description. And so it describes what's in the kit itself. So the kick is a 22-inch, and that's from Jamstix 3. Crashes, splashes, all that sort of stuff. So this basically just tells you, you know, if I click on different kits, you're going to see a different description for each one. But let's say I want the R&B classic roomy. No, let's say I want the R&B classic. Okay, I've made my pick. I click on load, Now you don't have to match the kit with the style. You know, if my style, let's say that I had drum and bass for a style, I could still use a New Orleans jazz kit with the drum and bass style if I want, which gives you a lot of really unique and interesting combinations. Okay? So the main thing is pick your kit and load it, and then once you've loaded it, you can change it if you want. Where did we go? Oh yeah, we were looking at R&B kits. R&B kits. Okay, so I could have changed away from an R&B kit right there if I wanted. Okay, so at this point we have our layout done, we have our style picked, we have our drummer picked, we have our kit picked. Now, if you don't have Jamcussion, you will not have these choices, because this is the Jamcussion style, Jamcussion drummer, Jamcussion kit. And with Jamcussion, it's basically set up the same way as the main part of the program. The Jamcussion part is like the main part. So that means you still have a choice of your style, a choice of your drummer, and a choice of your kit. Now, there's not as much variety in the Jamcussion stuff, but with the style of the Jamcussion pop, you can see I've got 27 different styles. Let's say I'll go light and funky, load style. With my drummer, I've only got a couple choices. Percy, yeah, I like Percy, so we'll have him. And then the kit, well, the kit, all kinds of things. Africa Gong and Rain Sticks would have djembe drums, congas, shakers, cowbells. We go to all shakers, and you can see it's just a ton of shakers and sticks. We go down to straight Latin. We've got bongos, congas, crash, rain stick, all sorts of stuff, claves. Okay, so let's say we're going to pick the Latin kit. So those three things picked the same way as you're picking stuff for your main kit. You may not have Jamcussion. Now, finally, let's say our verses are 8 bars long, so I'm going to change that. Our chorus length, for some reason, I've got a 5-bar chorus, slightly odd length. Now, I've picked all this stuff with my song builder, and I'm going to create a song. But I want to go back and just talk about one thing that I realized I forgot. Within kits, let's open that up again. Within kits, there are a couple that are not traditional kits. Addictive Drums, BFD, Tune Track. Now, you remember I said that you can route your sounds to a different drum module if you want. These choices are used as sort of standard defaults for some of the main choices. You might be using Easy Drummer. Okay, so if I click on Easy Drummer, you can see that my kit contents, they don't actually list things like, oops, let's not use that one. See, with a normal kit, you get all the actual different drum parts. But if you're using one of the drum module things, it says MIDI output only. And that's because that's how you set up your kit to default to go out to your other drum module. Okay, there's a couple ways to actually route your MIDI out to your drum module, but this is one of the ways. This is a simple way, and it can be pretty good. But since we're not using that, let's go with, we're not using an external drum module. Let's say that we're using the standard modern kit. I guess I'm changing my mind here. Okay. So, once I have all of these things, I guess I'm pretty much ready to build my song. And so, to do that, I just click Create Song. Done. Okay? And over here, you can see all my different parts that I programmed. Remember I said I want intro, 2 verses, pre-chorus, chorus. Wait a sec. Why are there 2 verses? Why is there only 1 verse? If you look over here, repetitions 2. I typed IVVPC. It knows enough to repeat the verse. So intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, pre-chorus, chorus, second chorus, repeated, and then ending. And then the number of bars are all laid out down here. So there we go. We have just created our first song. Simple as that. Okay? Okay, I want to backtrack something I should clarify. When I was talking about the kits and how you've got those presets for BFD, addictive, etc., so you can route default to your different drum modules. I want to clarify that even though BFD and those things show up, you don't get sounds out of them unless you own those drum modules. So don't get excited and think you'll automatically get all the BFD sounds. Just want to clarify that. Just for the people that happen to own those other things to make it easy. Okay, so let's look more carefully at our song sheet, the different parts. Okay, first we have a drop-down menu. Some very obvious choices: load song, save song, clear song, reset song. Okay, all these things I don't think I need to explain. They're very basic, straightforward. The wizard button, if you click it, your wizard is going to pop back up here in case you might want to make some changes and create a new song, but you can also turn it back off. Live loop. Live loop is, I'll talk about that later on in one of my other videos. It's not important for most users. Okay, so we'll keep it off. Timing. Okay, this looks interesting. So we have a whole bunch of sliders. Now, look down at this line, and you can see it says, controls the overall timing. Left is behind the beat, right is ahead of the beat, and it's in milliseconds. So this is a way of, you kind of change the energy level of the song by having the drummer either playing behind the band or ahead of the band. So you can either change it for the song as a whole, and if you look down in that section as I'm moving the slider, you can see how it changes by milliseconds. Now I'll leave that in the center, but let's say that I want to have a song where it's got a kind of lazy feel for the verses. Drummer's just kind of laid back to do that, playing behind the beat, just a touch. And let's say that when we get to the choruses, we want to make the energy level feel higher, and a way of doing that is the drummer plays aggressively a tiny bit ahead of the beat, and so the band is almost trying to catch up. Okay, so I could do that. I could leave the intro right on the beat. I could change verse 1 and set it back, let's set it back 2 milliseconds behind the beat. Pre-chorus I can leave as is. Chorus I can move 2 seconds ahead of the beat, and I could go through the whole song like that and change everything. Okay, I won't bother to do that right now. I will just swing this around to reset them all to 0. And then my next option, shuffle. Okay, same sort of deal. Sliders where I can affect the entire song all at once, or I can affect individual sections. And if you understand what shuffle does in terms of drumming, quick version, it's just a different feel to the beat. Okay, I can turn on, let's say that I want the verses to have a bit of a shuffle feel to them, but I want the choruses to be more rigid, straightforward time. So if I wanted to do that, I could say let's go with an 8th note shuffle feel, and verse will go 7%, verse 2 will go 7%, and that's it. Maybe that's all I want to change, so you can do that. But you can pick your different shuffle settings in percentages for each part, or you can do it for the whole song, and you can decide whether you want an 8th note or 16th note shuffle feel. And if you turn that off, we go back to our layout. Okay, looking again at the layout, so we've got the names for each part, we have the number of bars in it, we have the number of repetitions. This column, RF, repeating fill. So that means if that's checked, at the end of verse, if it's repeating, it will do a fill before it plays the repeat, the second instance of this verse. If that is not checked, then it'll play the verse once, and then no fill, go back and play it a second time. Now transition fill plays, if checked, plays when it's about to go on to the next part. So if I have just transition fill checked, it will not play at the end of the first repetition of the verse, because that needs a repetition fill check. It will play a fill as it's about to go into the pre-chorus. And so the fill, if it exists, always goes on the last bar of a part. So looking at the intro is 2 bars. The first verse, which includes the second verse, because it's got a repetition, is 8 bars long. So basically 10 bars into the song will be the end of the first verse. So if I look down at my bar list, there's the end of the intro, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's my fill. That's my first verse. And so at the end of the first verse, 10, is there a fill? No. And that's because it's going to repeat and do another section, another verse. So if I slide over 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, this is my second instance of the verse. And so I can see, remember that brown means there is a fill in the bar. So at the end of the second verse, because I have transition fill enabled, this lights up and there will be a fill. If I don't have a transition fill, the brown goes away. If I put the repetition fill in, which would be at the end of the 10th bar, as it goes back to play the verse again, it's going to turn brown right there in the 10th bar. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The trigger. The trigger column deals with trigger keys for live loop mode, and like I said, I'll talk about that later because a lot of people won't use that. Now, if I want to change stuff in this line, let's say I want to change verse 1. That's actually 2 verses because I'm repeating it. So I don't like to call it verse 1, I'll call it verse 1 and 2. And the length of 8 bars, if I wanted to, I could change it. Let's say that we've decided the first 2 verses are going to be short. They're only going to be 4 bars each. But there's going to be 3 quick verses at the beginning instead of just 2. Okay? When I click OK, this is going to change. Now, there's also a thing for time signature. I cannot change it away from 4/4 time. This is kind of grayed out, and that's because it always sticks with the time signature of my host, so I can't actually change that right now. But anyway, I changed the name, I changed the length and repetitions, and so watch when I click OK, watch what happens to this line. Okay, so now it becomes verse... Oh, it doesn't show the ampersand. Okay, so let's change that again. Let's go verse 1 and 2. Okay, that makes more sense. Verse 1 and 2, bars, repetitions. Okay, so I can rename all this stuff. If I wanted to, let's say I was having problems remembering the words for some reason, so instead of calling it, this would actually be verse 3, of course, because we've already done 1 and 2, but instead of calling it verse 3, maybe I want to use the first line, the clock on the wall. Let's say that's the first lyrics of that verse. Okay? So you can really set this up so it's pretty intuitive and it makes a whole lot of sense. And that's really all I can tell you about the song sheet section. So let's move on to the next section, a more detailed examination of the drum kit. Okay, so now that we've gone through the main song sheet section, let's take a closer look at the drum kit that we've picked. So, go up to your menu, click on Kit. Now this is odd, it says not loaded, and we already picked a kit. So I'm just going to double check Wizard, and look, Kit and my Jam Cushion kit are both struck out. Now I'm not sure exactly when I managed to do that, but that's okay, that's not a problem. Wizard, we'll go back into here. Now I can click on 2 things here. I can click on a drop down menu, which I'm going to ignore for now, we'll come back to, or I can click on the kit name. And then this lets me load a kit. Clicking on the name here does the exact same thing as clicking load right here. Okay, so let's pick a kit. We were working with an R&B kit, and I think we wanted to go with R&B Classic, perhaps. So I've picked it, and I'm going to go load. There we go. Now the kit name is there, and you can see the entire kit. Now, I already demonstrated in the last video that I can click on different parts of the kit to preview different sounds. And because most of these drums have multiple articulations or sounds, I'll get different sounds depending on where I click on the graphic. So out near the edge of a kit may be different than the center of a drum. Sorry, edge of a drum compared to center of a drum. Okay, I'm trying to avoid talking too much about MIDI here, but I do have to give you a very quick background. Okay, MIDI velocities. Velocities is a way of describing how hard an instrument is being played, and it's usually on a scale from 1 to 128 or 0 to 127. Don't ask why that scale instead of 1 to 100. It has to do with binary, 2 to the 7th, 128. Anyway, the lowest numbers to the highest numbers represent hitting an instrument lightly versus hard, or a keyboard lightly versus hard. So usually, if you hit an instrument differently with different amount of force, not only does the volume change, but the sound changes. So if you have a drum like a cymbal and you just tap it lightly, it's going to be more like a light pinging sound, which also happens to be low in volume. And if you hit it hard, it'll be more like a clunking sound, which also happens to be high in volume. So there is some relationship between the lowest velocities and the lowest volumes and the quietest articulations. Okay? So generally, with 128 different choices in your MIDI scale, generally there's probably 128 different volume levels associated with that, depending on how high your velocity is. And there's probably not 128 different sounds. Layered samples means there's more than one sample for the entire range. But in a case like that, there might only be 11 or 12 different sounds. So for velocities from 0 to 7, you might have the quietest articulation for all of those, with the volume slowly creeping up for each different velocity setting. Then once you get to velocity 8 through 20, you may come with a different sounding sample, which is a slightly louder, a more forceful sounding hit. And within that group of velocities, your audio volume will continue to rise. Okay? So it's a very complex relationship, but basically a light hit on a cymbal and a hard hit on a cymbal are going to sound different and also probably have slightly different audio volumes. Okay? And so by hitting the pieces of the kit in different places, this kind of emulates, it kind of gives you a visual and audio representation of what different velocities can do. And you can change velocities properly if you're programming stuff in, if you're playing on a MIDI kit and sending MIDI information that way. And of course the Jamstix brain knows a lot about velocities, and depending on how it's playing, it will affect velocities itself, which will affect the sounds used, the articulations, and it will affect the volumes of various parts of your kit. Okay? Now, depending on your kit, you may see some other pieces around besides the kick, floor tom, normal toms, snare, hi-hat, crash cymbals. This is probably a China. Yep, China, ride cymbal. Okay, so there may be some other parts of your kit. We've got jam block, high, low jam block, shaker, another shaker, cowbell, tambourine. And you probably can't hear those very well on the camera, sorry. But they are what they are. Okay, so as your song is playing, if I was actually playing in my host, as I play through, my parts of my drums will light up. Okay, now as it's playing, so this overhead view as it's playing is pretty useful and pretty educational. Now if I want to single out a specific part of my kit, say the snare drum, and I want to learn more about what it's doing, I've got a couple options. And in Windows, if I hold down the Control key and hold down the left mouse button, what it does is it solos that piece of the kit. So that's all that is playing right now. Now, another thing I can do is if I hold down the Shift key and press that piece of the kit, it mutes that particular part of the kit and everything else keeps playing. Okay, so that's a couple cool things that you could do. If you turn off the lock button, I can start moving pieces of the kit around. Okay, I mentioned this in the first video, so if I pull part of the kit away completely, the drummer is less inclined to use it. Let's have it playing and see what happens when I pull a piece of the kit away. Let's pull the snare drum right away. Okay, so now he's using this tom instead of the snare. But once I bring it back within arm's reach, he'll go back to using it. Okay, so pull something too far away, the drummer will stop using it, and of course rearranging your whole kit will change the drummer's performance. Now this dice icon is interesting. If I click on it, the whole kit is going to be rearranged somewhat. Oh, like that. Click on it again. Okay, so each time I click on it, it's going to be rearranged both in terms of the layout and the exact drums present, mostly the layout, depending on what's available. So what may happen is, like watch my hi-hat, I might actually get a different, yeah, see I get a different, I get some pieces of the kit changing, but layout definitely changing. So you can't hurt it, go ahead and change it around, and when I press play, I may get totally different sounds based on the kit because the drummer's going to do what's convenient and comfortable to play. Now, up in the top left hand of the graphic, we'll go back to this drop-down menu. And here's where we can adjust output routings if your host allows it. Many hosts allow for up to 8 separate outputs. Although I mentioned earlier, right now Pro Tools is limited to a single stereo master out. But as the manual states, you might have to configure your host to support multiple audio outputs, or else you'll only hear the sounds going to the first output. And so this depends on which host you're using. If this sounds like Greek to you, don't worry, the default value is for it to just work. Okay. Now there's also a number of options in this menu for sending audio or MIDI output, and these should be pretty self-explanatory, I think. The closed hi-hat variations menu, if you click on this, what it does is it lets you affect how much variety you'll get in the hi-hats, which can impact the realism of the performance. And directly underneath that, we have position-based dampening, which we can turn on or off. Okay, just like that. Going further down, resetting the visual kit arrangement. Look at how the kit's laid out right now. Try and memorize that. We go reset. Nothing has happened. Okay, so resetting a dice kit doesn't seem to do much. But if I pull stuff away because I'm experimenting and then I go into reset, it brings the kit back to its original state. Okay, so that might be useful if you're pulling stuff all around and want to go back to something that was built by the dice. And then finally in this menu, these key map options are related to MIDI, which again, a lot of people won't worry about. So I'll skip these for now. But if you're really experienced with MIDI, the key map is the assignment list as a tabbed text file. Okay, so that'll make sense to the MIDI people out there. Now, let's try to right-click on part of the kit. Let's go with this big symbol. Okay, so we have another menu pop up. Now I have the option to remove the piece that I clicked on. I can change its sound, or I can add another piece to the kit. So lots of options, and let's just play with it for a bit. You can play with all sorts of stuff without hurting this. So right now we have a 22-inch ride. Watch what happens when I switch to a 20-inch ride. Okay, watch what happens when I switch to a 24 ride bell shank. Okay, different sound right there. Okay, I can remove that piece from the kit. Gone. I can right click anywhere and add something to the kit. So let's add another China symbol. We'll go with a 19-inch China. Okay, there we go. Let's put the two Chinas beside each other. Okay, so lots of choices right there for customizing your kit. Now let's open the kit list again by either double-clicking here or clicking load. Okay, so under the list of the contents of a kit, let's go into a Cool Funk kit. Okay, so under the list of the contents, I've got three things. Lock outputs locks the current output assignments, so they won't be changed if you load a new kit. Lock mixer locks the mixer settings, so those won't be changed if you load a new kit. And keys only means that Jamstix only loads key assignments and not the sounds or the mixer settings. So this is more for advanced users. Okay, and then finally down here at the bottom, there's a filter box. And this box lets you control what gets loaded when you load a new kit. So this is handy for lots of creative kit composition. So maybe you like your current kit except for the cymbals. And so what I can do is I can say, well, I'm going to load the cymbals only from this Cool Funk kit to add to what I had before. Okay, and so it just loads the cymbals only and leaves everything else untouched. So all kinds of options here for playing with your kit, and you can't do anything wrong by playing with it. So experiment with it. You'll really quickly get pretty comfortable with the kit builder. Okay, to edit part of your kit, a specific piece of your kit, go and click on one of the instruments. So let's click on this one, and what's going to happen is you're going to get a little kit editor down here. So I can click on the name of the piece to come up with for me, 695 sounds. So I've got all kinds of choices here. So let's say that we want to change that to a ride. Okay, done. Okay, so you can load a different sound. You can change your volume of that piece, the panning of that piece, and all the different pieces are panned differently within the stereo field. You can change your ambience, your dampening, and your tuning of that piece of the kit. You can also change MIDI parameters if you're comfortable with advanced MIDI use and routing, and if you are, then you probably understand what these are. So now, what else? You have on the right side, you have this velocity graph, velocity scaling. And so this section is only going to be useful for advanced users. If you're being fed external MIDI that's playing through your kit, and it's all at lower velocities than you'd prefer, then you can use this to raise the velocities on a linear scale or on some sort of compressed or expanded curve. And you can also scale velocities down this way, of course. So there's a lot of there's a lot of flexibility to get your MIDI data into a useful band or range. And the min and max buttons right here are similar. You can set the minimum and maximum levels, and incoming data will scale within that range. Okay, so lots of options for editing your kit. Okay, next let's jump over to the Mixer tab, and you'll see that what comes up is an 8-channel mixer. Now it's important because if you change the number of outputs that you're using, you have to shut down your host, reload your host, your DAW, let everything reload. And that's because your audio outputs are set when your host is booted as the plugins are loaded. Okay, so if you make any changes, reboot everything. So let's take a closer look. So mixer, 8-channel mixer. And the drop-down tab at this upper left lets you load or save mixer settings. Now when we started out, the EQ button here is depressed, and that means that you can see the EQ controls, and that's all these knobs on the 8 channels here. You can see at the left we've got low, so these are the low EQ knobs for each channel. here's the mid knobs, and here's the treble knobs. So each channel gets its own EQ controls, and every other control. So let's switch on to comp. So that stands for compressor. Now I'm not going to explain how a compressor works because that's a pretty complicated subject. But if you do know how a compressor works, now you've got 4 knobs for each channel. And from top to bottom, top row is your threshold. And if you understand compressors, yeah, you'll know what I'm talking about here. So the top row is your threshold, next row is your attack, next row is your release, and the bottom is your wet-dry mix, okay? And above each row of knobs, there's a little toggle here, the blue light, and that toggles whether the compressor is on or off. And also, I guess these yellow things show whether or not the channel is active. Okay, so moving over to the echo next. And our compressor controls are now replaced by delay controls. So we've got 3 knobs for each channel, plus some stuff up here. So the knobs from top to bottom are the feedback, a low-pass filter, and a wet-dry mix. And the 8th refers to 8th note. Now you've got everything from 48th note to whole note, and that's because the delay is synchronized to your host's tempo. And then this little thing, if you click on it, lets you change from center to a slow pan to a fast pan. And that, of course, again, applies to every single channel. Okay, so going over to these toggles. So flip stereo, that changes the audio from the drummers to the audience perspective. So basically it just flips the panning of your whole kit. Down mix, if it's on, puts all your outputs to channel 1. MIDI only, if this is enabled, audio samples are unloaded and MIDI just routes to the host or to a drum module. AMB to last. So this toggle directs all the ambient effects to the highest output channel in your kit. And then we have 3 knobs over here, ambient, DMP, WID. So the AMB knob controls the overall ambience level for the currently selected drum or kit, part of the kit. The DMP controls the dampening of the room's simulated ambient sound. And the WID adjusts the stereo panning of the kit. So all the way left is mono, all the way right is full width stereo. And I don't know if I said that very clearly a second ago. This applies to the kit as a whole, not to each individual channel. Okay, so all the way left, stereo, all the way right, stereo width for the whole kit. And same concept for the ambient and dampening. I've tried to avoid getting into MIDI in too much depth in this series of tutorials for people that don't really understand MIDI, but you should know that separate from MIDI note data, there's also something called a MIDI controller, which could be useful to you. Now, a MIDI controller, you don't necessarily have to know a lot about MIDI to be able to use a controller. And it's because it's called a MIDI controller because the controller uses MIDI information to work. It's a communications protocol to make the controller work. But you don't have to know the technical background on how that happens. What you can do is just learn how to plug in and use a controller. And so I would almost say that let's just call it a controller instead of a MIDI controller so you don't get scared of the MIDI part. Now, if you don't understand exactly how a controller works, I've got a video that I did about generic MIDI controllers, and you should really watch it. I'll put the link down below. Okay, so take a look at it later if you don't understand. But here's an example of one MIDI controller, MIDI-based controller. Okay, and so it's got all these different buttons, knobs, faders, whatever. And the point of it is, okay, let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say in our song, we've got our 8 different channels on our mixer, and some of them control different stuff, like the kick is in one of them, some of the cymbals are in another one. Remember, multiple instruments can be in one channel. Think of the channel as like microphones on the drum kit. So one microphone might be down by the kick drum, so that channel hears mostly just the kick, or maybe only the kick, depending on how it's set up. Another microphone set up over the cymbals on the right side, so it hears kind of everything from there. It might hear a little bit of sound bleeding from the snare drum and stuff too. Anyway, so you can adjust your relative sound levels, emphasize different parts of the kit by playing with the mixer. So let's say that we have a hypothetical song where I've built it, and when we are playing the verses, everything sounds good. But when we get to the chorus, I've got really heavy kick and snare pattern, and I want that brought out and emphasized. So when we get to the chorus, I want to raise the volume on the channels that control the kick and the snare. So some of the channels, volume's coming up. At the same time, I want the EQ controls to come down a little bit and take a shine, because let's say I'm also using the ride cymbal during that point. And I want to take some of the shine off the ride cymbal so it's not so obvious and there's more emphasis on the kick and snare. And so I'm maybe turning up the mid-range on the snare also at the same time, but just for the choruses, not for the verses too. So if I'm trying to do that live as the song is playing with a mouse, it's impossible, because I've got tons of different things that I want to play with and change throughout the song, and a mouse can only really deal with one thing at a time, no matter how quick you are. Okay, so how would I resolve this? Well, personally, for me, there's a couple approaches. For me, probably what I would do is I would print the performance, the MIDI, record it to a track. I'd probably then split the MIDI, because that one track is going to have the MIDI data from all the different parts of the kit. I would split that up into each part of the kit having its own track in my host, and then I can really fine-tune things because I can play with each part of the kit individually. I can put different compression on things, different EQing, different reverb effects, whatever. And I can also automate all those different parameters on each part, and so I can draw those in very meticulously with the mouse. I can record a playthrough, stuff like that, where I'm controlling stuff. But anyway, that's the very fancy way to do it within the host. But you remember that Jamstix also has a lot of those controls. It's got the EQ stuff, it's got the compression, it's got echoes, it's got volume, faders. So if I didn't want to do it that way, some people might prefer to try and do it live. So as the song plays through, they're adjusting things on what it feels like a real mixing console. And that's where your MIDI controller, your controller, can come in. And so you can set your controller up. Well, maybe not this one, because this one, every controller has a different layout. So this one has a lot of buttons up here. And if I'm worried about trying to change my trebles and mids and lows, knobs, maybe knobs in my compression part, push buttons don't help with knobs. I do have my faders here at the bottom, which would be useful to map those faders so they control the volume faders in the mixer in Jamstix. But I need something with knobs up top. Let's say I did have something with knobs up top. Then I can set all these controls to control things in Jamstix, and then as the song plays, simultaneously I can work with both hands, and I can move several controls at a time when I want, whereas with the mouse you have to do one after another really quickly. So that's where the power of having a controller comes in if you want to do that stuff live. Now you don't need to do it live. Like I said, you can play with it using automation and stuff like that. Lots of options. And if you do want to learn more about controllers, look at my video. If you want to look at the types of controllers out there, do a Google search on something like MIDI controllers with lots of knobs and sliders. Something like that will bring up a whole bunch of web links, photos and stuff of different types of controllers that are available out there. So if you are looking for a controller to play with it, there's bound to be choices. If you're really technically inclined and like playing with electronics and stuff, you could go to something like the Livid website. It has a builder DIY, do-it-yourself section, which is really cool. They have all the electronics and stuff that you can build your own customized, personalized MIDI controllers. Something I've wanted to play with for quite a while. Maybe someday soon. Anyway, so that's how controllers work and how they can help your workflow in Jamstix. You may not use them, but you may want to use them, and if so, the option is there. Okay, I think that should be enough for this video for tutorial 2. Thanks for watching. Share if you found it useful. If you're looking for the next video in the series, you can find the link at djbolivia.ca/videos. And if you're a user of Twitter or SoundCloud, you can also follow me on those sites, twitter.com/djbolivia, soundcloud.com/djbolivia. Thanks for watching.